Welcome to Together, a higher ed podcast where we bring you stories, insights, and experiences from voices across the higher education sector. I'm Chase Haygood, the Vice Provost for Student Success at the University of Utah. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Professor Chris Hulleman of the University of Virginia, where he's Professor of Education and the Director of the Motivate Lab. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, we're really delighted that you're here. I knew that you were going to be in town. We had been in communication. We've got perhaps some news to break on this podcast about a really good partnership that's on the horizon between Motivate Lab and the University of Utah. I'm excited about that. We're really glad that you're here. Thanks for taking some time. I know you're in town visiting with colleagues at a conference as well. So thanks for your time.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. And it's way better than our Zoom meetings, seeing you in person. So,
Well, to get started, I'd love for us to hear, for viewers and listeners, to hear a little bit about your journey in higher education. I think one of the most powerful things that we've got are the narratives of our lives that have been changed by higher education. So almost everybody that's on, we start there. Like, how did higher education, how did you get into higher education? What was it like growing up, wherever it is that you grew up? Those elements, was it just expected that you were on your way to higher ed, you were going to go to college? What happened while you were there that propelled you into your career and into the work that you're doing today?
yeah, so that'll take up the next 2 episodes
Great.
of the podcast for me to detail all that.
Fantastic. Part 2 coming soon.
Right. So to keep this a little brief, I mean, it's in some ways a remarkable success story of a white male from college-educated, wealthier parents makes it to higher ed and gets a PhD. Who would have known, right? But I do give a lot of credit to my parents who, my dad ended up getting his PhD eventually. He was a school superintendent. My mom was a librarian, first an English teacher, then got her master's of library science and was a librarian. So early on, education was just a part of what we did in our house. And I don't know that I was told I had to go to college, but I wanted to go to college. And maybe it was implicit from them or not, but mostly what I wanted to do was be an NFL football player. Now, I was kind of a runt in high school, so that seemed pretty unlikely. But I did end up playing college football at a little Division III school in Iowa. I grew up in Iowa. And if I said, general studies major football player, quick, stereotype, pops in your head.
One of the best students on our campus.
You would be different than most of the people I have met, but I was really fortunate to be at a school, Central College, Pella, Iowa, that they allowed you to kind of choose your own path. Mm-hmm. And a general studies major was you pick from sort of 6 main areas: humanities, natural sciences, social sciences. I'm not sure what the others were. Those are the 3 I picked. And you got to get about, I don't know, it was probably 40 credit hours, a certain number of 200, 300 level courses. And you just had a lot of freedom. And that just spoke to me. So higher ed really, that opportunity in undergrad really helped me do the transformation part of your model, the excellence model that I really like at the University of Utah. Shameless plug. As an outside observer, I really like that model. But it really allowed me to find myself. And, that experience helped me have no clue what I should do after I graduated, unfortunately. I thought maybe graduate school in psychology because I loved to think about motivation, but I really didn't know. So I ended up being a high school teacher, a social worker. I was a crisis counselor back at Central College. I was a residence hall director, got to live in the dorms again. I also coached college football and pondered that as a career as well. But eventually just sort of realized that what I really loved about working with people wasn't teaching them X's and O's on the football field. It wasn't, any particular content I taught them in the high school science classroom. It was helping motivate them to get what they wanted out of life. Yeah. And I wondered, what's the science of that? Because when I was a teacher, when I was a counselor, I would ask people, what do you do to, help people? And why do you do it? And do you know if it works? And virtually nobody could tell me why it works. They might say, oh, I went to a teaching conference. This person had a really cool idea. Or this person from the University of such and such is doing this, so we're going to do it. But it wasn't because it increased graduation rates or there was any evidence. It was like it felt good. It sounded good. And that kind of intuition around being a practitioner is so important. There's also the other side about what actually works. And I wanted to know what that was. I wanted to go to grad school and essentially be a Pied Piper, take the science of motivation and go back out to teachers, coaches, parents, managers, whoever, and help them do their jobs, but just do it a little better.
Yeah.
So that's part of the higher ed journey. I'll stop there because that was way too much talking.
No, that was fantastic. I want to follow up on something that you said there because knowing your work at UVA and having seen it now from a couple of different perspectives, I think there's something you said there, Chris, around that the intuition piece, so part of my background was in faculty development, right? And because I love teaching, I love that moment. And I really do believe gen ed or general studies, rather major, who's a student athlete, the power that I think every single student's journey and life can have on an institution and vice versa, the institution can have on them. I mean, I think that piece of higher ed today seems to be, one, I want to see what you make of this idea. And I also want to get back to what I heard you say, which I think is a point of intersection that I think maybe there's power in both of those. So I'll come at it this way, see if I can get your reaction. The untapped resource and the untapped energy of where students are partners, kind of an old idea, a Dewey kind of idea around construction, right? Where students are participants in this work. Now we've got all the experiential and active learning and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All that's drawing on a really old idea, right? That the learner is engaged with somebody who's probably 3 or 4 or 5, 10 steps ahead of them on that learning, whatever that content is, or at a research one institution like UVA or the University of Utah, the ability to create new knowledge, right, with people who are learning as novice and getting to more expert status. There's power there. I'm wondering what you think about that and how we should be tapping it better when it comes to things like motivation, particularly when you got a really good teacher. I'll go back to the faculty development movies. You got really good teachers. You're watching really good teachers do really great things in the classroom, and you say to them, like you did, where'd you come up with that? And either they experimented or they had heard that somebody else was doing it this way, or maybe, if they were lucky, somebody did whatever the technique was with them and it worked, and then they're replicating and they're revising, right? They're on this kind of trajectory of, let's see if I can refine it, make it better for a next generation. I'm wondering if you could speak to either of those, particularly when you hit the sweet spot between a teacher, practitioner who's really good. I don't know if it's like they've got charisma. They just care a lot. They're invested. And you put a little bit of research in the science of learning and of motivation, educational psychology in the mix with them. And I mean, they just kind of, they take off, right? And then, to your point, graduation rates, persistence rates, satisfaction, happiness, all those things begin to, I wouldn't say that they take care of themselves, but they begin to organically respond to the things where you're testing an intervention and you're deploying kind of energy in another space. Comment on either of those, or if there's interconnection there from your perspective and your work.
Yeah, a lot of interconnections. That last piece there, it's like those things that get created, those motivations, those drives, those skills, those mindsets, they become drivers themselves. And I think we sort of forget that sometimes when we're trying to produce an outcome and control the outcome to the end and ensure that the student's going to make it to graduation by this time. We forget that not all paths look the same, and there's curvier ones than others, and there's non-linearity in the system for individuals. And how are we accounting for that is a really important question. But to get back to this idea that we are trying to create the conditions under which humans can thrive.
Yeah.
And when we do that, it's self-perpetuating and self-sustaining and self-correcting. When I say self-correcting, it's like, oh, you're going to come against another obstacle. You might have solved your first semester transition obstacle, but now you might have a financial gap obstacle that pops up in your second year, or an illness, or you fail your first chemistry exam. How are you going to navigate those obstacles? We need folks who can both self-correct and part of self-correct and utilize resources.
Yeah.
So those both are important. And I think we sort of sometimes think, oh, we're going to control the heck out of this system to get the exact results we want and the exact timeline we want. And there's a lot of individuals in this system.
Yeah.
So really resonate with that point. And to go back to your point around the potential energy that students have in our system to contribute to institutional improvement, institutional betterment.
Yeah.
What a novel idea. And, one that I think throughout the education system, K-12 and higher ed,
Sure.
if we approach students with a deficit, like, oh, you're not doing the thing, then that's bad, versus,
Right.
Why are you doing it this way? And what might we learn from you as much as what you need to be learning from us, the purveyors of knowledge and wisdom and skill? And it's that mindset isn't just true for students. It's true for the faculty in the system, the advisors, the administrators, who all have great potential to contribute to the system. But if we only want them to do a job as is prescribed, we're missing out on so much of what they have to offer. And it kind of stinks to be in that system where you're not thriving. You're just doing a job. You're doing the thing as it was designed by someone else that isn't you. So I think those things work together to feed up to maybe answer both of your questions around, and maybe at the heart of it is humility and power. So what I mean by that is, do we have the humility to say, oh, any of us could learn from anyone else? Not all the time and on everything. There's a reason I have a PhD in psychology. I've worked hard. I've studied. I know a thing or two.
Yeah.
And when I have undergraduates or graduate students in my class on motivation, which I do every spring at UVA, I learn so much from them as they're like reading these classic theories for the first time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you get the same thing when you're marching through history as you do with your students, and they're reacting in a way that you're like, I wouldn't have thought about it like that. Well, you're not 19. You weren't 15 when COVID hit, like all those things that you don't have that perspective. So, what's holding us back from leveraging that? I think it's humility of thinking, oh, we have to like always be in charge and always know. And then like being in power and being in control of things.
Yeah. Wow. Really, really good stuff there. We could go a couple of different directions, Chris. I want to kind of press you on a little thoughts about, what holds us back from that? What holds us back from, a willingness to say, I've done things this way and this way and this way across across my career. It could be any number, kind of, let's say first year. Like we want to see more of our students retained in the first year into the second year. Well, there are a lot of different strategies. This is not new. We've been working on, student success in the United States now in a very kind of concentrated way for 20 years or so, that maybe even 30, right? In a concentrated institutional kind of way that would say, I like the way that you describe it. We're going to put these things in play, and we do that on the basis that we anticipate that all of these humans are going to act and respond the way that we want them to.
Or the way the ideal student would respond.
Right. So it's like perpetuating systems that weren't necessarily even built for the students, thankfully, that we see at our great universities, large, small, community colleges and the like in the country at present. So I'm wondering, but part of that I think is a question of just sound leadership, right? What does it mean? And leadership broadly writ, like leadership where you are, if you're an advisor, if you're, an assistant professor, if you're associate dean, if you're an assistant vice president, wherever you find yourself, the ability to lead from that spot to say, I have something to contribute. Do you see a lot of that? I mean, you work with a lot. We'll get to Motivate Lab in a second. You work with a lot of different institutions, systems, large, small. What is there something holding us back? I know that may be a leading question, but what holds us back? Is it ego? Is it, I don't know, dare I name it, hubris? Is it a fear of failure that we've got even among perhaps a leadership broadly distributed, that would say, well, if I try that, or if I bring other folks in, it may take longer. We might fail. What's that going to look like? Other thoughts. I mean, am I making sense, Chris? That to me, there seems to be the time is like right now to be able to do new things that are desperately needed, but you can't get there if you're fearful or if there are these kind of restraints baked into the system. So are there? And if so, how do we get rid of them?
Oh man, there's a lot of restraints built into the system. And, the one that'll be the least popular thing I might say today is white supremacy and how just our vestiges of our history, and white supremacy is one. I would say the way capitalism has been contorted is another. And just, it's like, we have capitalism on steroids now compared to what it was like, in the coming out of the Great Depression. But I don't think this is a podcast for that per se. I do think that there's a lot of forces. I mean, higher ed is experiencing a very challenging moment where funding continues to decrease, and there's an increasing percentage of people who question the value of higher ed. So there's less financial support, there's less seeming cultural support, and some of that comes with waning enrollments, although a lot of places have been rebounding since COVID. And I just saw a report out recently that overall nationally that maybe we're almost back to like 2020 levels. So that was an encouraging sign, but you have a lot of fiscal pressure, and then you have this cultural pressure. So that creates challenges for any leader. So I've never been a college president or provost, so it's easy for me to sit over here and throw rocks at that glass house, or maybe anyway. No, that's a different story. I'm not going to tell. But let me tell you a couple stories maybe that'll help give you my perspective of the challenge. So when I was a social worker, I worked with 12 to 17-year-old boys who had been adjudicated for some kind of crime, usually something related to drugs, and like violence or theft or could be assault. And they were in the judicial system, and maybe they had been in juvenile detention. Maybe they weren't yet. And the judge had said, hey, if you work with this social work organization, it was a nonprofit social work organization, for 6, 9, 12 months, and you have satisfactory progress, we'll just put that in your file and we won't prosecute it, and you can keep going. It was a way to give these young kids who often were coming from scenarios, environments that there wasn't a lot of supports, and there was a lot of ready availability of drugs and opportunities for doing things that most people would consider not positive for society. And one of my clients was a guy, I'll call him Teddy to protect the innocent, 17-year-old. He was 6 months away becoming 18. And if this charge was on his record, he was going to get tried as an adult, and prison was probably going to happen. But if he could work with me successfully, it would be in his juvenile record and he'd be good. And Teddy was a 6'4" black boy / man who had, as the kids would say today, lots of riz. He could charm a grandmother. He could, babysit 3-year-olds. He could charm the heck out of us social workers. Really smart, emotionally intelligent, but also bright. And I remember one day we were on the basketball court, and I played college football, but my favorite sport has always been basketball.
Nice.
They just didn't need a lot of 6'2" post players, so I had to try something different. And he's shooting bombs like from 30, 35 feet, and this is 1996, so Steph Curry is not in the NBA yet, so this is not normal. These are very long shots. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, it's just a matter of practice, Chris. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, just got to work your way back. And so over a matter of weeks, Teddy worked with me on shooting jump shots from further and further away. Now, I never became quite as good as Teddy, but I was a lot better than when I started.
Yeah.
And, I remember that moment because, one, he was just very willing to teach me. And two, I learned a lot about myself that day, but I learned more about him and just his approach. And I wish I could tell you that from there we went on and we helped Teddy and to straighten things out. But shortly after that, he disappeared. And I think he never knew his parents. He always bounced around from extended family member to extended family member, and he disappeared. And I think he saw the writing on the wall, because honestly, these kids, they really needed to really change a lot of things about their context, and they didn't have the means or the mechanism to do it. So even if they got things straightened out, they went right back to where they were living, right back with the friends that wanted them to do the stuff they were doing. It's really hard to say no when you're in those situations. So, that experience with Teddy, I always talk about Teddy because of the unmet potential, and what he really needed wasn't Chris Hulleman's social worker driving him to his drug test, driving him to the after school program, getting him to set goals and stick with those goals. He needed system change. And what that really takes is humility from those of us in a system to say, why is Teddy ending up this way? And why there is an unending line of Teddys? Like our social work company, we're just hiring new social workers all the time, because the state social workers would have 200-300 clients. We had a cap of 15. As I would go to their school, I would go to their after school events, I'd go to their homes, I would pick them up from school in the morning, to go to school in the morning. I wasn't able to change his system, but he could show me what he needed, because he was willing to meet me where I was at, because he was willing to teach me how to shoot a basketball. Yeah. And I think that's, if we take that kind of mindset with our students who aren't doing what they want, instead of saying, that's a defective student, we could say, hey, what is it in this system that needs to be, that's leading for this student to do this, especially if this is one of just an unending line of students. Yeah. And I think that's what we have in higher ed. We have all these external pressures that sort of distract us from thinking, and this is my last point and I'll shut up, that we kind of have, I think, what I consider a vending machine attitude towards higher ed right now. I put in my quarter, I get out a job. And that sort of skips past all the things that need to happen to develop durable skills, or whatever we want to call them now. It used to be 21st century skills. I think they're durable skills now. In order for us to do that, what needs to take place for all these different students, not just the wealthy white men who show up, who, man, this thing's, the skids are grease for me. If I make a mistake, there's a lot of opportunities I have to come off. Teddy makes a mistake. He's in the juvenile justice system, and he may not get out.
Yeah.
I don't know if I actually answered it.
No, you did. You did. Chris, I want to follow up and get your thought about one piece of that story where I think it'll stay with me for a while. And that is, in the dynamic between you and Teddy, you showed a willingness to be taught. And I mean, there's just a lot of power in that. I think that reflects back to other people, agency, and that you see them as someone who's able to contribute, in this instance, across age, across race, probably across socioeconomic class. And I think there is some real, if we were to take that piece, just that piece, which there's a lot to learn from what you just shared, in terms of how we aspire to be good leaders, and leaders, again, throughout our institutions, throughout our organizations, because the times, as you describe them, are complex. The pressures are great. They are myriad. But I don't know that the challenges are insurmountable if we try to, and we'll come back to this again in a moment, if we do the work together.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I love the title of the podcast. I'm looking over here, Together, a Higher Ed Podcast, because I think that's absolutely right. And for some reason right now in our culture, the idea of inclusion is, for some, is a really bad word. But humans, we are designed, I'm not a biologist, but we don't live if there isn't a community protecting us when we're small.
Yeah.
You have a youngster who's
Yeah.
in need of protection now.
Yeah.
And eventually they grow up to be, if things go well, they get to be adults and they get to have a lot of agency. So we absolutely have to do this thing together. And to think that only some of us know the right way to do everything, over the weekend I was in Iowa all last week. That's where I grew up, and I got to see family and friends. I went golfing with my brother-in-law. He's left-handed, and so when he grew up, he had to bat right-handed and golf right-handed because that's what you did when 50 years ago when he was 10. Yes, Jay McGovern, I just called you out for being 60. But now he gets to golf left-handed. He's like, it's so great. He's like, he was hitting the ball all over the place, not straight at all. But he's like, it's great I have left-handed clubs. And to think that, what it was 90% of the world right-handed, I don't know. But it's really important for those 10% of people who are left-handed that we create a situation that they can use their dominant hand. Something as simple as, when I was in grade school, they only had right-handed desks. So the lefties had to turn their bodies to like right. And just a simple thing. Can we have a few left-handed desks, or better, create desks that aren't handed? And I think it's a good metaphor for us as leaders. We go in thinking, hey, all the world should be right-handed. And well, all the world's not right-handed.
Right.
All the world wasn't raised by my parents and my situation. Like I could learn a thing or two. And I think that's the humility and the growth mindset, the idea that, we can improve our abilities through asking for help and trying things and failing, and that we don't always have to know the answers. And I think that's really hard for some, especially in our culture, especially men, because we're taught, hey, when you're a leader, you're tough, you're strong, you're never wrong. And boy, I think that's the wrong kind of definition of a leader. But unfortunately, in our culture anyway, that's the way some folks get it defined for them, and they try to live up to that, and they don't want to be vulnerable.
Yeah. So I'm going to pivot us to Motivate Lab, and to do so, I'm going to call on something you just said there and tell a very, very quick story that I think speaks to this idea of help. So over the course of my career, and this was at a previous institution, I did a lot of new student orientations, and in one of those orientations, so think big ballrooms, about 600 people, parents, supporters, and students. This is at the beginning of a 2-day session or orientation kind of schema. So I'm called in to talk about student success, big surprise, and all the various things the institution has and how these are the kind of top 10 things. I was always more of a fan of Letterman than Leno, but so top 10. So somewhere along the way, I decided to start, because at the University of Georgia, where I was before Utah, we had built out a really strong tutoring center. One that was doing great things, but then started doing even greater things through trying to think about how do we study the impact we're having, and then how do we leverage that research to get even better, right? So step levels. Let's understand, and it turned out, no surprise, but early and often. Earlier, pretty simple stuff. Earlier student comes in, and the more often they come in, the greater the likelihood. And we were moving letter grades by with those students early and often in high DFW gateway courses by 3-4 letter grades on average if we got them in early and often. Mm-hmm. And often was at least 10 times over the course of the semester. So I'm sharing all that, and then it occurs to me somewhere about halfway through the orientation session, which drove the director of orientation a little kind of like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm just going to do a little different. And they were like, no, we've got our spiel. You're doing your thing. What do you like? I asked a question of the 600 people in the room just to get the talk going, a little bit of interaction, because people before me had done their talk. And then I get up there and I take the microphone off the lectern and I'm out in the audience, right? And the question I asked him was like, okay, if you're willing and you're able, I need everybody in the room to stand up. So those who were willing and able did so. Typically, almost everybody in the room if they were able, would do so. And they say, I'm going to ask you to sit down if you can answer this question, yes. It's going to get to 2 points, help and some masculinity stuff. The question was, if you've ever needed help. And I was like, I had to be very specific. I did it a couple of times, and the more specific the language, the better off it went. If you've ever needed help. Now, this was after having met you all at Motivate Lab. If you've ever needed it, just the power of reflecting it and being conscious of it, I think is important to note. And if you could answer that, yes, take a seat. And that set the the parameter around, like, these are all the resources, these are all the things, and if that there's strength, right, in asking for help. And I talk about my own, like, I'm constantly asking my executive assistant, faculty, staff, all kinds of people around me all the time. I'm asking them for help. And me saying that to students, rather than telling them, you belong, believe me, I'm telling you, you belong. Okay, I understand it. But also, there's more power in saying, hey, here's some vulnerability in our society that seems to be like, don't ever show any of that vulnerability because that's weakness. That there is, in fact, my view, strength in saying, I need help. Point 2, masculinity. And then I'm going to ask you to comment on it and then speak to Motivate Lab, if you will. And the really great things that you all are doing at Motivate Lab. Where does it come from? Where is it going? Anything you'd like to share, Chris? On one morning, it was sometime in mid-July, very hot and humid. I go into the ballroom, chatting with my colleague on my way in. We're walking through any number of things, and then I pivot and grab the mic, and I'm on. I ask the question. Everybody's up. Everybody sits except one dad. And I'm pretty experienced in a classroom, in large environments. I'm very comfortable in that regard. I was like, oh, you've never needed help. He said, I never ask for help. It's weak. And in the moment, and this may be wrong, and other folks who are watching this or listening to this podcast may be like, oh, and maybe he's even listening. I don't know. Probably not. I didn't let it go. I followed with him for a second. I was like, I think this is a teachable moment. Teachable for me, teachable for the other 559 people or so in the room. Teachable for the orientation director who's over there freaking out. I said, I said, okay, well, I didn't really ask. The question wasn't, have you asked for help? It was, have you ever needed help? Well, I don't need help. So I'm not sitting down. I said, well, you're at liberty to continue standing if you'd like, but can I ask you one quick follow-up question? And he said, yeah. I said, how did you get on this planet? And people kind of like laughed, and I'm gauging the room, and 600 people, not a small room to try to catch what's going on in the minds of people, and the certain people that are checked out and the other people that are like close to him that are kind of like leaning away. Like, oh, please don't let, whatever's about to happen come my way.
The train wreck is approaching.
And he was like, I don't know what you mean. I was like, I'm assuming that you, like all humans that I'm aware of, were born. Like, a woman birthed you onto the planet. And he was like, well, yeah. I said, oh, so you needed help. You didn't ask for it. But without her, I don't think you'd be here. And in probably those first many months, if not years, to your earlier point about my kiddo, like, you needed help. You didn't know you needed help. You didn't ask for that help. But there it was. And he just kind of looked at me. I was like, feel free to keep standing if you like, but... And he slowly began to sit down. I didn't do it to embarrass him. I didn't do it to make him feel small. But the parents and the students after the session who came up to me who were kind of like, do you know him? And I was like, no, I've never met him before. And we did not speak after. But I think for the students and the other parents and supporters in the room, it's like, that's even more powerful than my moment of kind of like, no, like, we all need help at some point. We all need help pretty regularly. I think that's one of the good things that comes out of the pandemic of like, right? We were all in it.
Yeah.
We're not going to come out the other side all on our own.
Right.
Thoughts about any of that?
Yeah.
Feel free to critique my approach to my one dad who eventually did sit down.
Yeah, I think I would have responded similar to you. I would have tried to think of a situation where, of course, you needed help. Can you remember the first meal you had?
Yeah.
Let's go way back. You needed help eating. Come on, bro.
Yeah. My mind immediately went to the most primal.
Yeah.
Like, how did you get here? Like,
well, I love that too, because it was like you needed help from a woman.
yeah.
As a husband and father of 5, just always be indebted to my wife for all the work she had to do. That wasn't my burden to bear to be pregnant and deliver babies. So, it's just it's very difficult to look at the human experience and think we either evolved or God created us to need each other. I don't know how you look at it any other way.
Yeah.
So I don't think I would have done anything any different. And it was probably a pretty powerful moment for everyone.
Including me, I will say.
Yeah, because also you're reflecting on, could I have done that in a way that wasn't as, felt like it called him out. And but that's, the risk of those activities, it could always go sideways.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you ask people, even at a conference, it's kind of like, this is our agenda, this is what we're going to talk about. Does that sound good with everybody? I've never had anybody say, no, I don't want to talk about what you're going to talk about. I've never had anybody do it, but it's always a risk to be like, somebody be like, no, I don't want to talk about this. I want to talk about something else. I'll be like, well, in slideshow. All right, go for it.
Yeah. And I think that's being human and you are on topic, a story, but it's on topic to the idea of student success here. And, what you were up there talking about was your student success and having students get help. I was running a workshop on learning mindsets, which are students' beliefs about themselves as learners, their perceptions of the learning environment, for an unnamed state, because I'm going to name the position, this official position in the state hierarchy. So I won't name the state. And one of the things I often start with is, what are the motivational challenges you face with students? And I do this to ground everyone in sort of where they are. Like, they're all showing up to this space and with different students they're working with, and maybe different challenges. Maybe they're an instructor, maybe they're an administrator, maybe they're a counselor. So we can all be like, oh, we're here. And there's some validation, like we hear around the room, 3, 4, 5 themes usually. And this woman who was the chancellor of the higher education system in this state, she very confidently raises her hand. And she's like, I think our problem is grit. If students were more gritty, then we would have much better success rates than we do now. And I kind of had to take a step back. And, you hear this sometimes, like, hey,
sure,
students need to be grittier, or I hear this a lot, students are soft. There's a political version of that about being snowflakes and whatever. But, that's what every old person said about every new generation, right? So it's not very creative. But people believe it. They do believe it. And so, and this person was she was the head of this person was the head of the community college, the state community college system. So, I had to take a step back and say, okay, I hear that. Students, we'd like them to be gritty. And what about the community college student who's working, which most community college students have at least a part-time job. It's over, I think it's well over 70%. And they're not able to go to office hours because they're working second shift. So they can't make office hours. And as a result, they're struggling in the class and they don't have a way to access support. And by the way, this student takes 2 buses to get to school. And I'd spent some time in this community college system, and the number one complaint about students was transportation. The campus in the major city of one of the flagship community colleges, the transportation system didn't take them to the satellite campuses where many of classes were. So it was very difficult for students to like get there and get back in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
Number one issue. So let's say the student musters the finances to buy a car, and then all of a sudden they have a flat tire.
Yep.
The second challenge that community college students said in this system, and it's pretty applicable across the U.S., is affordability. They don't have the money to spend on college because they're also supporting their families. Sometimes their extended families, they're still living at home with their parents and they're expected to contribute. So we have these two factors that have nothing to do with their internal fortitude and their motivation. It's pragmatic. They got a job and they can't get to campus. How does that have to do with grit?
Yeah, you can't grit a clock and you can't grit more money into your bank account.
No, and as a matter of
or
fact,
a tire.
Right. As a matter of fact, for many of these students, they are super gritty just showing up.
Yeah.
They've spent more grit chits than
Yep.
the rest of us for the whole week just showing up for class because you had to take 2 buses and arrange childcare and then figure out how to get back to your part-time job. So that is not an uncommon reaction. It was just unfortunate that it was the head of the community college system because it sort of signaled this like unwillingness to see that, you know, if your system continues to produce the same thing over and over again, and at that point in time, this community college system was mired in about 15 to 20% 3-year graduation rate and about a 25 to 30% 6-year graduation rate for community college. So very low, not being very successful. To think, oh, it's the students that they're the problem. It has nothing to do with us. And I connect that back to what you're talking about for student success, that a lot of times people come to me and say, hey, you just gave that talk on learning mindsets. I heard you say growth mindset. Our students need growth mindset at my school. I'm like, well, why is that? Well, they're failing math. And I'm like, okay, why do you think it's growth mindset? That's why they're failing. Why isn't it other things? Well, you just said that students who have a growth mindset do better. Yeah. I said, do you think that's the only reason why people are successful? What are the other things? Oh, yeah, I guess it could be, access, affordability. And I said, okay, so how do you know that it's growth? If we improve growth mindset, you're going to get good results. What if 80% of your students have a growth mindset? Now we're going to do something that it doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
And so really we need to work, and part of our approach at Motivate Lab is to first empathize and learn what's happening in your system. You might be the provost, you're a really accomplished professional. I have no doubt about that. But I want to know what do you know about your system and why do you know it? Do you know it because you've talked in your cabinet of leaders and you all believe this is a perception, or have you talked to students? Are you using your data? I know you have a very data forward mentality, and it's part of the puzzle. It's not all the puzzle.
Yeah.
Like I said, our intuitions, our craft knowledge, it's so important. We should do more to doubt that less, actually.
Yeah.
At the same time, we should incorporate other sources of information and always wonder, are we seeing the whole picture? And I think that that's the part of, I was raised in the Midwest, and certainly I was raised to have beliefs about what it means to be a man and boys don't cry and all that stuff. And there's some of that I still, have internal to me. But the part that I never understood was not being willing to learn from others.
Yeah.
And you unlike the gentleman who stood up, I can think back of all the coaches that helped me so much in all my sports.
Yeah.
It's just one example of, if I did the things they said, all of a sudden I was a better player at the end of the season. And for me, it was a no-brainer because I just wanted to be the best. And so that kind of vulnerability was not something that held me back, but I do think it does, especially in system change.
Yeah.
Did I answer any?
You absolutely did. You absolutely did. I mean, I think that I think between the compounding kind of pressures, cultural, political, trust, budget, you name it, in the midst of all that, it seems as though in a lot of places right now, it's let's move as fast as we can. That in sometimes or often doesn't take time to create that kind of integration of expertise across the board. And so I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about Motivate Lab. Where'd it come from? What are you guys up to? What are you all doing? And then I'm going to ask you the kind of big closing question, because I know you're in town. You got other things you got to get to. I'm really grateful for your time and thinking and energy and all the great things that you all have done. So I want folks to hear and see a little bit about that from you around Motivate Lab.
Yeah, the quick comment on integration. I think that is key, and we've got to recognize that we've got people with lots of different expertise right in our space, whatever space we're in, and then look for our blind spots, and then get external consultants like Motivate Lab or others to bring in when we don't have that skill set, and it's working together on that. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So Motivate Lab, to go back to my original story, I go to grad school thinking I'm just going to learn the science. I'm going to take the bad medicine of go and do the hard science of psychological science, motivation science. And I'm going to be, like I said, the Pied Piper.
Yeah.
Well, it took me about one semester to realize most of this science of motivation, it's not translatable. It's done in, the experiments are done in laboratory settings with mostly college sophomores who come from elite public and private institutions. They're mostly educated white males and females, and some people of color and lower income first gen, but mostly not, right? So a lot of the insights are based on, a biased population that doesn't widely apply, and it's done in a lab. It's great to work out memory strategies in the lab, but if you go into the classroom and you're in your average fifth grade classroom, you've got kids poking each other with pencils. You got kids running around. I mean, you have fire alarms going off. William James is a famous psychologist, and he talked about the blooming, buzzing confusion of life. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to understand as psychologists. And we need to do our research in that space in order to really understand the phenomena. And so I was in graduate school and I was like, I don't want to do this science. It has no appeal to me. Maybe there's some questions that are very theoretical, but they're really removed from what's happening in the world. And how am I going to help people teach better and parent better from these studies? I don't really know. So Motivate Lab was born then, essentially. I mean, I didn't have the name or anything, but I was just I need to do science differently, and I need to do it out there with the people. Mm-hmm. So that was my mission going through grad school, and I did a postdoc at Vanderbilt University for 2 years. And while I was there, really hatched this plan of okay, here's what applied research could look like. It could be rigorous, and it could be helpful. It would be theory-based and very practical. So that's where we came from. And my the vision is, can we bring together people who've been trained in the science of psychology? We bring together practitioners from different walks of life. Most of our work is in education, but we work in sports, we work in business, we work in graduate medical education, for example, with medical school students. Together to identify the problems that need to be solved, bring to bear, different people's perspectives, and then figure out where's the motivation angle on this. Because sometimes I go to a school and I work with them and I realize, what you really need? Your students need support on financial aid and basic needs. That has nothing to do with grit. And maybe, I can work with your math faculty to teach better, and maybe there's some mindset stuff there. But I'm going to tell you, if you have, $100,000, you should use $99,000 of those dollars on those things and get out of the way. Yeah. But if there is a motivational aspect to it, which often there is, then sure, we'll engage and try to apply the motivation science to that space. it's been amazingly rewarding, really hard. It's really hard to own, to have the primary people you're working with be practitioners, because we were talking, you're in your 4th year here and you've had multiple presidents and provosts.
Yep.
There's a lot of churn in the higher ed system, staffing. And so you develop those relationships, people leave. Sometimes the new people want to work with you. Sometimes they don't want to work with you. So it can be a challenge, but that's why I do the work. I want it to be out there with people. So we only work in partnership with practitioners and others as we do our work, and try to make it as translatable as possible. And then connect back to one of the points we were talking about, learning from others.
Yeah.
Then we take like the hypotheses, or the cool ideas that instructors have. I call them hypotheses. Like you're like, hey, my calculus class, it's 8 a.m. and I'm only getting like 25% of students to show up regularly. I got an attendance problem. And then you're going to be like, what am I going to do different? And you're going to try something different. You have a hypothesis that you're testing. And most of the times, instructors don't think about themselves that way, but I point out to them, you're actually a researcher. You do it all the time. And I love that light bulb popping on, like, oh yeah. And then I'm like, oh, we did this other research over in someone else's classroom. Do you want to see what they did and how it went?
Yeah.
And maybe you want to try it here. So we take like the insights from practitioners and go, oh, that's working well for Chase Haygood at the University of Utah in U.S. History 101 or whatever class you taught, survey.
1700, yeah.
So, okay. That's working well for Chase there. Let's see if it might work over here. What would we have to do to change it? And then we'll work with someone at Nashville State Community College to adapt it there and try to help them figure out if it's working there. And after a while, we're like, oh, this is a thing. It has a lot of potential to be used a lot of places, and try to spread that out. So then the challenge becomes scaling instead of efficacy testing. So we try to, do the efficacy testing. Does it work in a place with, a group? And then does it work in many places with many different groups? And then, okay, let's see how we can get this around, spread out, and worry so much about, is it still working everywhere? Although I would love to always know if it's working, but collecting data can be a challenge.
What is one of the most rewarding things that you've experienced with Motivate Lab and working with all these partners in testing not only efficacy, but impact? I mean, as you say, faculty kind of willingness to see themselves as a researcher, as a practitioner, as an advocate and an ally in student success, which I think is the kind of next big, both in the student and the faculty spaces, in those domains, into the, bringing more folks into the tent of student success to say, no. Student success isn't one office. It isn't one vice provost. It isn't one team over there who's, they're the ones who do student success. I'm over here doing, chemistry. No. We're all doing the work of student success. Is there one or two instances that have just been truly rewarding, Chris, as you've done the work over the last couple of years?
Oh, there's so many. So I'm just going to right away say I'm not going to pick the best because, which is my favorite child.
Sure.
It's not fair. You only have one kid.
Yeah.
I have 5. So I it's a little, so I love all my children. But 2 just came to mind.
Sure.
So I'll just say those. So one of our partners is at Cal Poly Pomona in the Cal State system. He is a botanist and a biology professor. He also leads their Center for Teaching and Learning in math and science. He was one of our original participants. The pandemic was awful in so many ways, right? But some really cool stuff came out of it. One of the things that I'm most proud, my team, all of our work stopped with our partners. They're trying to figure out how to do online, and everyone's like, hey, what do you know about online motivation and engagement? We're like, nothing. We all teach in person. We don't know anything. And after about 3 or 4 weeks of that in March, we're like, hey, we have to stop saying this. We have to actually figure something out and start. Yeah. People are literally dying out there, but the instructors are feeling like they're dying because they can't reach people. So we did a bunch of research. We put together some handouts, and we started to do some webinars, and then we were like, we need a course. We need to do something. So we put together an asynchronous course. The intent was it would take about 2 weeks, and it might take you up to 15 or 20 hours to go through and learn about the psychology of motivation, start to think about your role as an instructor differently. You're not motivating students, you're creating environments that are motivating to all students.
Nice.
And then we had the opportunity to enroll people in this course. And Paul, we got some funding from the College Futures Foundation in California. And Paul is one of our first participants in this course, and he just loved it. And so he went back to his campus and he spread the gospel. He was like, as the teaching and learning center director, he's giving workshops, he's getting people excited, he's running communities of practice. One day he emails me and said, Chris, thank you so much for giving me the chance to be in this course. And I was like, well, it was the College Futures Foundation that paid for it, but okay, I'll take it. And he said, the motivation revolution has begun at Cal Poly Pomona. And now they've had several hundred faculty take this course. About every semester, every other semester since 2021, they've had faculty taking this course. The dean has now told him that when he looks at tenure packets and he's looking at the teaching section, he can tell which instructors have taken our course and which haven't.
Sure.
Because of how this student-centered, mindset-supportive language and framing are in there. And coming full circle, we are working with the state of Louisiana, the Louisiana Board of Regents. And this, in past May, we did a co-requisite academy for about 80 or so math and English faculty who are engaged in reforming how they do developmental education. The co-requisite model, for the learners who don't know what that is out there, says instead of taking, for students who need extra help in math or English, instead of taking 2 or 3 remedial classes and then taking college level math or English, you enroll right away in college level math and English. And then you also take a co-requisite support class, which might be extra tutoring, extra instruction. It might be more like how to do college, study strategies, those sort of things. These models have been wildly successful, but they don't solve all the issues. It's just, you have to still teach the students math who don't have a history of being successful in math. It's still a tough row to hoe, as we would say in Iowa. So we were leading this academy of about 80 math and English faculty. We want to give them a high quality experience. We invited Paul to come to speak, share what's happening there, and share some of his best practices. And he brought one of his colleagues, Sanaa, who is a chemistry faculty member, and our post attendee feedback were like the 2 best sessions were Sanaa and Paul's sessions. So like, when your kids grow up and they go do something, and you probably had that experience even with your 4-year-old, like they do something, you're like, they did that? Like, that is so cool. And you're just beaming with pride in a way that you would, it's way beyond pride of you doing anything yourself. Yeah. So seeing Paul and Sanaa, who took our course, who are our students, technically, quote unquote, who are now out there, sharing with others and teaching others. So cool. And we're trying, that's the model we're using now with our course. We're trying to, as we go to different states and work with faculty, it's finding the local champions who we can offer some additional training and support beyond the course so that they can go lead the communities of practice with some of our help on how to facilitate. But they're really talking about, hey, I'm here, I'm one of you, here's how I solve this challenge with our students. Here's how, let's work together. So that's like, it's just such a great story.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing it. I'll drop a little bit of news here, and then I'm going to pitch you last question.
Yeah.
And that is, based off of all of that really incredible work that you all have done at Motivate Lab, University of Utah will be working with you all to bring similar kinds of approaches to thinking through in kind of 2 spaces, as I think of it now. Not just on a conversation that's already underway around co-requisite remediation in the math and writing space here at the University of Utah, but also trying to think through the larger kind of defining student success work that is also underway. But I think some of the things that we have to learn and be willing to learn is in that learning mindset, one of our core areas is around thriving, a student's ability to thrive. And I think some simple metrics as a GPA, that's one indicator. But I think we have to be mindful as institutions and as practitioners and as advocates for the purpose of higher education and its potential for transformation, pressing beyond simple metrics that says, yeah, that's good, great, we want that to keep ticking upward. But we also want to think holistically about students. We want to think about them as a whole being, a whole person, and their ability to persist at the institution, but to do so in a way that we would say we want every student to be able to thrive here, and not just here, but out, right, into the world.
Yes.
That we have had the great joy and the great privilege to sit alongside them for a minute, even, less than 6 years doesn't feel like a minute, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a minute that we sit with students. And I'll say this as a pitch to how do we do more of it, Chris? Like, philosophy underway here that is in fact motivating part, not all, but part of our work at the U is this notion that, as I again say to students, I was with students recently at an orientation session, and part of it is we as an institution, if we do our job well, and they're doing their job, right, really well, we have an opportunity for every single one of those students, no matter their background. They could be working class, first-gen kiddo like me up from the rural South, or they could be multi-gen affluent kid, from Iowa. No matter the student, they could leave the institution transformed, and I mean that in two ways. They themselves and we as the institution that they have become part of, right, that they will leave it transformed. So I want to ask you, with that as a kind of setup, how do we bring about the kinds of lasting transformative change that you've talked about, that you've led from your experiences, from when it went well and when it didn't go well, if you wish you could do things differently and all that? How do we bring about that kind of lasting transformative change together?
Yeah. Before I answer the question, super thrilled to be working with you in the University of Utah. So excited about this. And one of the things that's unique about your space is you do have this student success model that already integrates a lot of the ideas that we would encourage folks to consider. So it feels like we're just here like a chiropractor, just to help push you downhill a little bit and get you adjusted and get you running. Just really thrilled to be working with you all and seeing what you've done here since you left the South a few years ago. How do we create lasting change? I think to kind of concisely say this and to connect to some of the themes, I think it's what I see right now in higher ed, but I see it in our culture, psychologically and physically, people are struggling. There's a lot more anxiety than there's ever been. There's a lot more mental health challenges than there's ever been. And you can't just write that off like, oh, we're diagnosing more people now. Like, no, like there was an uptick, if you look at the research on anxiety, there's an uptick starting around 2012-ish or so. And then, throw some gasoline on that fire from the pandemic, right? Yeah. And I see a lot, and I think for educators, that's especially true, whether they would want to admit it or not. And we know a lot of educators are like that man in your session. They don't want to ask for help because they're going to get let down. They're going to say, no, there's no help coming. So they don't even want to ask because they don't want to be vulnerable and then get shut down. So it's not just the students that need to thrive. For a healthy system, a system that we'd want to be in, the adults and other people working on the system, they need to thrive too. So thinking about well-being and what I would call learning mindsets, these psychological perceptions that are more adaptive, those are leading indicators in a system. They're the canaries in the coal mine of, hey, is this a system that we'd want to be in, that you'd want to send your child into, that you'd want to be in yourself? That not only are you going to feel great, you're going to be psychologically healthy, you're going to experience well-being, but you're going to be effective. You're going to be developing skills. You're going to be working towards something. And if we put those things together, those mindsets with well-being, those are drivers that perpetuate the ability to solve problems, the ability to course correct. When you go down a road, you think, I want to be an engineer. And then you get into that one systems engineering class and you're like, wow, this is not my bag. This is not my cup of tea. What I really want to do is, I want to teach English or whatever. That's okay. Like, that's not a mistake. That's not like you did the wrong thing. That's actually you exploring and realizing, oh, I can cross that avenue off. I'll try something else now. Take all those lessons from some of those engineering classes that you took and apply those to be a better English teacher, be a better parent. So I think if we can create systems that center mindsets and well-being for everyone in the system, then that system's going to be super effective. You're going to produce really high quality graduates, and it's going to be the kind of place we all want to be in. Yeah. And we all have that friend that like everybody wants to be around. They're just infectious. Like, be that system that everybody wants to be there, and you kick butt too. Yeah. So that would be my suggestion. My hope is that we can integrate those ideas into the core of what we're trying to do, and think about everybody, all the humans in the system.
I love it. Thanks for that, Chris. I look forward to working together. I really, really do. I appreciate your time today. Viewers, listeners, this has been Together, a higher ed podcast. Join us again next time.